everybody, Brian Mirau here. We're going to talk today about our 3 pockets of money. Now when we sit down and we work with a client, we have one very simple objective in mind, and that's to show you how to take your bucks that you have this year and simply turn them into a buck and a nickel next year. Now when we say a buck and a nickel, we're not limiting or guaranteeing 5% growth. What we're saying is we want dollars to be going forward, upwards. We don't want dollars to be going backwards. And if we're going to have a chance to do that, the first thing we have to do is understand our different pockets of money. Now we literally have 3 pockets of money. Most of our clients, when we sit down and visit, most of them are savers and not spenders. And when they get ready to buy something, they typically don't like buying things on time, borrowing money to do it. So when you have a rainy day, kind of like what we've seen go on with this COVID-19 thing, when you have a financial hard time, you got to make sure that you've got some good short-term money that you can access when you have an emergency. So our first pocket that we have is what we call our short-term pocket of money. Now this pocket is one where we have access to. It's a pocket where we can put our money in this morning, we can get it out this afternoon. This is a pocket that we all have to have. Now, I've got some clients that say, Brian, how much should we have in this short-term pocket of money? Well, as a rule of thumb, we typically suggest 6 months worth of expenses is typically an adequate amount to have in this short-term pocket of money. Now, however, I do have some clients that say, Brian, I like to have more than that in there, and that's okay. I've got other clients that say, Brian, that's more than I care to have. That's okay. You want to have enough in this short-term pocket of money to make your stomach feel good, to know that you've got enough rainy day funds if you have a rainy day. Now, we want to be careful, however, not to have too much money in this pocket because this pocket is not very efficient. This pocket, when you have assets in this pocket, first of all, because we're in a 50-year low interest rate environment, you don't make much in the way of interest on it, and what you do make, you have to pay taxes on. So it's one that we've got to have, but we don't want to have too much in there. Now our second pocket is what we call our medium-term pocket of money. Now this is where we really start to work on this efficiency thing. We absolutely want this medium-term pocket of money going forward. And there's typically 4 things that we have to hedge against that keeps that from happening. The first thing we've got to hedge against are these things called taxes. Okay, now I think we live in the greatest place in the world and don't mind paying taxes for all the liberties that were provided. However, we've been given the Internal Revenue Code, and inside the Internal Revenue Code, there's a lot of opportunities not to pay unnecessary taxes. Just like when you put money into your IRA or into your Roth IRA. Why do you do that? To gain some tax advantages. Okay, so we want to be efficient against taxes. The second thing we've got to be efficient against, okay, is this thing, I call it the stealth tax. It's one that we don't see, touch, or feel, but it's one that we have to think about. Another word for this stealth tax is that word called inflation. So we've got to hedge against inflation. Okay, and here's why we have to hedge against inflation. Because as we save money and we prepare for our retirement, we got to make sure our buck today has a buck worth of purchasing power tomorrow, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, if we live that long. So we got to make sure that our bucks are worth a buck tomorrow so we can maintain that same purchasing power. And the reason why is because right now, 2/3 of us that make it to age 65 are living into our 80s. 1/3 of us that makes it to age 65 are living into our 90s. So we're actually living a whole lot longer than we used to. And what that does is that puts a lot more stress and pressure on your buckets of money. The third thing we've got to watch out for, okay, are these things called unnecessary fees and expenses. Now, I don't have any problem for a good day's pay for a good day's work. However, a lot of times when we open up the hood and we look at different types of investment vehicles out here, we will typically find a lot of high unnecessary fees and expenses. And again, I don't have a problem for a good day's pay for a good day's work. However, you don't want to be paying unnecessary fees and expenses. So you want to be efficient against that. And then the fourth thing that you've got to be efficient against okay, is this thing called market risk. Okay, the reason why we have to pay attention to this market risk is because once we get older and we step over this retirement threshold, it's a whole different ball game than it was when we were in our accumulation phase. When we were in our accumulation phase, we had the luxury of having time on our side. We had the time to set money aside, and we had time for this market to go up and down and go through all the volatility that it had. However, once we get ready to retire and we step over this retirement threshold, we don't necessarily have the luxury of having time on our side to make a financial mistake and have time to overcome that. That's why we've got to be efficient against risk. And now we'll talk about balancing risk in our next segment here. But these are typically the four things that we have to hedge against that typically prevent our bucks from being worth that buck and a nickel next year. Now, there's going to be a point in time when you have to start taking this money out of this pocket. For example, if you have 401ks, 403bs, IRA accounts, not Roth IRA accounts, but all of these accounts that are pre-tax. Well, when we turn age 72, it used to be age 70 and a half, but that just changed this year, and it bumped up to age 72. So when you turn to 72, you have to take out these things called required minimum distributions. And that's at age 72. Unless you're working and still contributing to a 401k plan, then that rule doesn't necessarily apply to your current 401k plan with your current employer. But at age 72, if you're not working and you're retired, you have to do these required minimum distributions. And if you don't take them out, okay, those are those things that Uncle Sam is going to penalize you. And the penalty for not taking out the correct amount of required minimum distribution is 50%. So you want to make sure that you get this right. And then a lot of our clients say, Brian, we're having to take this money out. We don't need it. All it's doing is causing us to pay more in the way of taxes. What do we do with it? Well, if you need it, you take it out, use it, and spend it. But if you don't need it, you take it out. You have to pay Uncle Sam his taxes on it. Okay, because he wants his tax money. But then you put it right back over here in what we call the rest of our life pocket of money. Now, these two pockets should be equally efficient, okay, against taxes, inflation, market risk, and fees. So we want to be efficient with our dollars. And so that's what we do with these required minimum distributions. If you don't need it, you still want that money accumulating for you, taking care of that older person you're going to someday be, and being what we call the rest of your life pocket of money.